How to make a sunflower using acrylic crystal beads. You can make many variations from these basic instructions as and when you feel like experimenting. The minimum tools and accessories you need is as follows: one cutting plier, one bent nose plier or a flat nose plier, and some glue in a tube with a fine pointed tip. You will need the following parts: 12 pieces acrylic flat pendant, orange color, 34 by 9 by 5 mm, 12 pieces acrylic flat pendant, orange color, 20 by 8 by 4 mm, 8 pieces acrylic flat pendant, indigo color, 9 by 8 by 4 mm, 1 piece acrylic drop bead, 12 mm, 30 pieces acrylic beads, round, 5 mm, or 2 meters of artistic wire, silver colored, depending on whether you want the flower stem covered by wire wrap or by acrylic beads. Furthermore, you need 3 pieces acrylic leaves, 55 mm, 1 piece flower base, style 5, 48 mm, 20 cm coated metal wire, 50 cm silver wrapped metal wire, 80 cm transparent nylon wire, size 0.3, 1 piece perforated plate, 1 piece crimp bead 2.5 mm. If you order the parts from us, the artistic wire will only be included if you choose wire wrap of the flower stem. If you choose the round acrylic beads, these will be included instead. These parts may be bought from any shop selling acrylic beads, or they can be bought from our company at sualsa.com, decorative art, crystal flowers. Here is an image showing the various parts. We are using black nylon wire for demonstration purposes only. You will be using transparent nylon wire, which will not be so easily visible on the finished product. Start out threading 2 of the 34 mm pendants onto the nylon wire and adjust them until they are roughly at the middle of the wire. Thread one end coming out from a bead into the other bead to form a loop as the image shows. Attach the next bead in the same way and continue until all beads are mounted. Connect the last bead to the first bead so that the wire comes out on the same side as the other wire from the last bead, and we can tie the ends together. The last bead is now attached to the first bead so that the 2 wire ends come out on the same side next to each other, as shown here. Tie the wire ends together. The easiest way to do this without entangling the beads is to tie 2 knots loosely as shown. Tie the first knot with the left wire on top of the right wire, and the second one with the left wire under the right wire. This will ensure that the knot does not easily glide out when tightened. Now tighten the knots firmly. To make the knot even more secure, tie an extra knot on top of the 2 first ones and tighten it. Put some glue on the knots. After a few minutes, cut both wire ends about 2 millimeters from the knots. Repeat the same procedure for the 12 pieces 20 millimeter flat pendants and for the 8 pieces indigo colored flat pendants. This should be the result for the 3 assemblies. After receiving feedback on the product, we found that we should use 8 indigo beads instead of 6. Enter one end of the nylon wire through an outer hole of the perforated plate. You may also use the next row of holes instead of the outermost one. Now put the wire through a neighboring hole. Enter the wire through the hole of the neighboring 34 millimeter bead. Connect the next neighboring bead and continue through the next empty hole in the plate. Proceed in the same manner until all beads are tied up to the perforated plate. Make sure that the 2 ends of the nylon wire comes out on the same side in order to tie them together. If the wire ends are on opposite sides of the assembly, just put one wire through a hole in the perforated plate so that they come out on the same side. Tie the ends together and put a small amount of glue to the finished knot. After a few minutes, cut the wires about 2 millimeters from the knot. From the bead side, it would look like this before the knots are tied. You can also fasten the 34 millimeter pendant beads directly to the perforated plate without first tying them together. Enter the 2 ends of the nylon wire through the perforated plate and adjust so that the 2 ends are of about the same length. Enter one acrylic 34 millimeter bead onto one of the wire ends. Mount another bead as shown with the wire coming out of the first acrylic bead. Enter into the next bead from top, down through the hole of the bead and through the hole of the perforated plate. Enter the rest of the beads in the same way and tie the wire ends together. Glue the knots and cut the wire ends about 2 millimeters from the knots. This is how it should look from the perforated plate side. And this is how it should look from the bead side. Enter the silver wrapped metal wire through the hole in the faceted drop pendant. Drag the wire through the hole until about 5 to 6 centimeters of the wire sticks out from one side. This step is preferably done after you have fastened the 34 millimeter beads onto the plate. But for clarity purposes, here is just shown the procedure with an empty plate. Put the coated metal wire through the middle hole in the perforated plate and bend one end into a small U shape about 6 to 7 millimeters long. Put the U-shaped end through a neighboring hole in the perforated plate and squeeze the end tight so that the wire don't fall out again. If you want to use the artistic wire to wire wrap the stem of the flower, enter this wire into the 2 holes as shown. The short end can be flattened towards the perforated plate in order to secure the wire from falling out again. If you don't want to wire wrap the stem, then leave this step out. Here is how it would look when you have mounted the 34 millimeter beads onto the perforated plate first and attach the wires afterwards. This is actually the preferred way to do it. To mount the 3 different bead assemblies together, insert both ends of the wire attached to the drop pendant into the middle of the indigo colored 9 mm assembly, then through the middle of the 20 mm pendant assembly, and finally enter the wire ends through 2 opposite holes of the perforated plate, where the 34 mm pendants are mounted, as shown here. This is seen from the perforated plate side. Twist the 2 sides of the wire together while putting pressure on the pendant drop bead until you feel that the 3 bead assemblies are held together properly and there is quite a bit of resistance when twisting the wires. Be careful not to twist the wires too hard, as they can break. If that happens, just cut both sides of the wire close to the perforated plate and also after the twist. Next, repeat the insertion as explained earlier and do the twist again. The length of the silver wrapped wire you have received should be sufficient for repeating this procedure at least 2 times if necessary. When you are satisfied with the tightness of the twist, cut the short end of the silver wrapped metal wire close to the twisted part. Enter all the wires through the middle of the acrylic flower base and press the base onto the perforated plate. If you want a more secure bonding between the perforated plate and the base, put some glue onto the plate and press the 2 items together. If you are wire wrapping the stem, start the wrapping as tight to the flower base as possible and continue wrapping until you have covered about 1.5 cm of the stem from the base. Bend the silver wrapped wire in a sharp angle. Enter the silver wrapped wire through the hole of 1 leaf. The leaves we are using as standard for this flower has a hole and a slot at the end for easier fastening of the wires. Go through the hole 1 more time in the same direction, creating a loop, and then fit the wire into the slot of the leaf. It may not fit properly, but that's okay. Adjust the distance from the stem to the leaf to about 1 cm and start twisting the wire by turning the leaf. Twist until there is some resistance and until the leaf sits firmly and does not hang loose dangling. See to it that the twist goes all the way into the covered metal wire. Make sure the wire wrapping is as tight as possible, especially where the leaf is mounted, and continue wrapping for another 1.5 cm. Fix another leaf in the same way as earlier and continue wire wrapping for another 1.5 cm and fix the last leaf, and then continue wire wrapping until you reach the desired length of the stem. The most common length is around 18 cm. Cut the silver wrapped wire about 1 cm before you end the wire wrapping part of the stem. Then cut the coated metal wire about 1 cm after you finish the wire wrapping part of the stem and enter the crimp bead onto the coated metal wire and the artistic wire, and cut the artistic wire after the crimp bead. Bend the end of the coated metal wire into a U-shape. Squeeze the U-shape into a closed loop towards the crimp bead and press the crimp bead with a flat or bent nose plier. If you cover the flower stem with acrylic crystal beads, the artistic wire is not mounted. Enter 3 beads onto both the coated metal wire and the silver wrapped wire, and bend the silver wrapped wire in a sharp angle. Mount the first leaf as described earlier. Enter another 3 beads and fix the second leaf. Then another 3 beads and fix the last leaf. Each time you mount a bead, try to squeeze it as tight as possible in the direction of the flower base. Enter the rest of the beads until you reach the desired length of the flower stem. If you feel the leaves should have a different distance from each other, you adjust the distance as you see fit. Cut the silver wrapped wire before you enter the last crystal bead, and then enter the last bead. Cut the coated metal wire about 1 centimeter from the end of the last crystal bead and enter the crimp bead onto the coated metal wire. Bend the end of the wire into a U-shape. Squeeze the U-shape into a closed loop towards the crimp bead and press the crimp bead with a flat or bent nose plier. And that's it. You have finished the acrylic sunflower as described and should have one or the other of the 2 flowers shown below. Using the wire wrapping method, you can combine any number of flowers and wrap them together into a big plant or a bouquet that can be used for table decoration, etc. Some of the assemblies we have made are shown on our website under Decorative Art, and you can just press the link below to get into that website.